Hello, everybody. Uh, Due to circumstances beyond my control, we're not moving very soon. In fact, it might be a month or two before I move. So, I figured I'd get a start on the uh, Bible studies. I'm going to make it very quick and easy, just going by a series of summaries of books of the Bible that are on the website of the organization that ordained me. And I believe this is the best method for giving you a foundation on which to build your understanding of the Bible. But don't get it twisted. There is this little thing called context. And the thing with context is, first of all, context involves what the verse is actually saying versus what it's not saying. Context also involves what surrounding verses are saying and what they're not saying, which is why you never read a single verse. It also involves what the chapters are saying and not saying, and what the surrounding books and other books are saying and not saying. It also involves things like the history behind the passage, the culture behind the passage, the language being used and translated into, the psychology of the writers, the subject matter, and so many other things. It's not a practice for the faint of heart, but it will strengthen your mind, and it will make you a more intelligent and thoughtful and careful student. So, let's discuss the books of the Old Testament. Okay? The Old Testament is divided into several sections. First, you have the Pentateuch, or Torah, as it is known in... Actually, to give you a little background information, the Bible was originally the Old Testament. That was the Bible. It was divided into the Law and the Prophets during Jesus' time. Jesus further divided as rabbis would one day divide it as well into the Law, the Prophets, and the Psalms. The Hebrew name for the Old Testament is the Tanakh, which stands for the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. This means simply the law, the prophets, and the writings. Now, Christians have further divided it up into sections based upon common themes and commonalities between the books. The first section is the Pentateuch, or Torah. This is including the books Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Then you have the historical books. These are books, obviously, that tell the history of the Israelites and the Jews, ranging from just after they crossed into the Promised Land all the way until the end of their captivity in Babylon and Persia, or the Babylonian and Persian empires. After which comes what's known as the 400 years of silence. That was during the conquests of the Greeks and the Romans. The historical books are known as Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Judges and Ruth having originally been one book, 1st and 2nd Samuel, again one book, 1st and 2nd Kings, one book, First and Second Chronicles, one book, Ezra, Nehemiah, also one book, and Esther. Then you have wisdom and poetry. This includes the historical and yet philosophical book of Job, the poetic book of the Psalms, the philosophical books of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, and the poetic book. It's not prophetic unless you consider it a type of Christ in the church, but the book Song of Solomon, also known as the Song of Songs. Then you have the major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, the Lamentations of Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Then you have the minor prophets, which were known in Jewish literature as the 12, because there are 12 of them. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. By the way, Jonah is also a historical account of a time in the prophet Jonah's life. That's mainly what that book is about. It's not so much about prophecy as it is about a period in the prophet's life. Although there is a prophecy regarding Christ and his death and burial. The Old Testament consists of a total of 39 books, as they are divided today. Now let's talk about a summary of the Old Testament. And it's important that we get these summaries because it lays the foundation for each of the testaments. We're going to have a summary of the Old Testament and a summary of the New Testament. The Old Testament is the first section of the Christian Bible and also holds significance in Judaism. It is a collection of religious writings and historical accounts that were composed over a span of many centuries, from about the 15th century BC all the way until about the 5th century BC. The Old Testament is divided into several books, and here is a summary of the major themes and events covered in each book. Genesis. The book of Genesis describes the creation of the world, the origin of humanity, and the stories of key figures such as Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It also recounts the events leading to the migration of Jacob's family to Egypt. Exodus. Exodus focuses on the liberation of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt under the leadership of Moses. It includes the 10 plagues, the crossing of the Red Sea, and the reception of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. Then you have Leviticus. Leviticus contains law and regulations for the religious rituals, priesthood, and ethical conduct of the Israelites. It emphasizes the importance of holiness and outlines various offerings and sacrifices. Then you have Numbers. Numbers recounts the Israelites wandering in the wilderness for 40 years after leaving Egypt. It includes a census of the tribes, the rebellion against Moses, and the sending of 12 spies to scout the Promised Land. Then you have Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy means second law, and it consists of Moses' farewell speeches to the Israelites. It reinforces the importance of obeying God's commandments, recounts the wilderness journey, and prepares the people for entry into the Promised Land. Then you have Joshua. This is getting into the historical section. Joshua narrates the conquest of Canaan under the leadership of Joshua, who was Moses' successor. It describes the fall of Jericho and the division of the land among the 12 tribes. You have Judges. Judges tells the stories of various leaders, called judges, who delivered the Israelites from oppression. It highlights a recurring cycle of the people's disobedience, oppression, repentance, and deliverance. Then you have Samuel, or 1st and 2nd Samuel. These books trace the history of Israel's transition from the period of the judges to monarchy. They include the stories of Samuel, Saul, and David, Israel's first kings. Then you have Kings, or 1st and 2nd Kings. The books of Kings document the history of Israel and Judah from the time of Solomon to the Babylonian exile. They cover the reigns of various kings, including Solomon, Elijah, and Hezekiah. Then you have, much later in the prophets, Isaiah. Isaiah is a prophetic book that contains messages of warning, judgment, and hope for Israel and other nations. It includes messianic prophecies, especially in the later chapters. Then you have Jeremiah. Jeremiah is another prophetic book that warns the Israelites of the impending Babylonian captivity due to their disobedience. It also speaks of hope for restoration and the new covenant. And of course, going into the wisdom and poetry section, you have Psalms. Psalms is a collection of poetic songs and prayers. It covers a wide range of emotions and themes expressing praise, lament, thanksgiving, and wisdom. And then you have Proverbs. Proverbs offers practical wisdom for daily living. It consists of short, concise statements that provide guidance on moral and ethical issues. And you have Job. Job tells the story of a righteous man who faces immense suffering and wrestles with questions of God's justice. It explores the nature of suffering, faith, and divine wisdom. And then you have, in the prophets, again, Daniel. Daniel is a book of prophecy and historical narratives. It includes accounts of Daniel's experiences in the Babylonian and Persian empires and contains prophecies about future events. This summary provides a brief overview of the major books and themes of the Old Testament, but it is important to note that each book contains many more stories, teachings, and insights. Now, just for this video, I'm going to also do the summary of the New Testament, because we're talking about covering the whole Bible. Okay? We're going to start by talking about the books of the New Testament. The New Testament is the second part of the Christian Bible and is composed of 27 books. Here's a list of the books of the New Testament in the traditional order. First you have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Then you have the book of history, or Acts, the Acts of the Apostles. Then you have the Pauline epistles, or letters, meaning Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, and some people put in Hebrews, even though the author of Hebrews is not really known. Then you have the general epistles or letters. You have Hebrews, which is often put into the general epistles because we don't know who wrote Hebrews. Then you have James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Jude. Finally, you have the book of prophecy, which is the Revelation. And this is often known as the Revelation of John, the Apostle, or the Revelation of Jesus Christ the Divine, depending on which version of the Bible you get. Sometimes it's just known as Revelation. Now we're going to cover a summary of the New Testament. The New Testament is the second part of the Christian Bible, and it consists of 27 books written in Greek between the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. It provides a record of the life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, as well as the growth and spread of the early Christian church. The New Testament is divided into 4 main sections: the Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, the Epistles, and the Book of Revelation. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, provide accounts of the life and teachings of Jesus Christ from his birth and ministry to his crucifixion and resurrection. The Acts of the Apostles, written by Luke, contains the story of the early Christian church, describing the spread of the gospel from Jerusalem to Rome, the Roman Empire, and highlighting the role of the apostles in its growth. The epistles, or letters, were written by various authors, including Paul, Peter, James, and John, to provide instruction and guidance to the early Christian communities on topics such as theology, ethics, and Christian living. Finally, the book of Revelation, written by the Apostle John, provides a prophetic vision of the end times, including the return of Jesus Christ and the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom. Overall, the New Testament presents a message of salvation and hope through faith in Jesus Christ and provides guidance for Christian living and growth. And that's going to be the end of this video. My second video on this topic is going to cover the books of Genesis through Deuteronomy. And I hope you enjoyed this video and come back for the next one. Until then, God bless you.